The Endurance floated quietly in the cold vacuum of space, its gleaming hull reflecting the distant light of the system's twin stars. Inside, the atmosphere was anything but calm. Captain Elise Juno stood at the command bridge, her eyes fixed on the main display, scanning the looming asteroid field between her and New Horizon. The Krenth fleet was close, and soon, the invasion would begin. The Krenth had never encountered anything like humanity. Their empires spanned galaxies, their weapons honed over centuries of conquest. Yet they had underestimated Earth. Underestimated humanity's will to survive, and more dangerously, its ability to adapt. Captain! Lieutenant Garrett's voice broke through her thoughts. Our long-range scanners have picked up Krenth fleet movements. They're almost on top of New Horizon. Elise didn't flinch. She had seen the data, the threat was real, but she refused to let panic creep into her mind. The Krenth were known for their ruthlessness, their overwhelming numbers. But they were about to discover that humanity didn't rely on brute force alone. Status of the colony? Elise asked. Colonial defenses are holding for now, Garrett replied, his fingers dancing across the terminal. But they're not equipped to deal with the Krenth onslaught. We're the first line of defense. She nodded sharply. We'll give them the time they need. Set course for New Horizon, maximum speed. Prepare all weapons. Understood, Garrett said, a trace of uncertainty in his voice. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, Elise could see the worry etched on his face. He wasn't alone in his concern. The crew, all of them, knew what was at stake. Elise looked back at the display, her fingers tapping the edge of her chair. The Endurance was humanity's newest and most advanced battleship, designed to be a game-changer in the war for survival. But even with its incredible technology, the odds were stacked against them. The Krenth fleet outnumbered the human forces by nearly 5 to 1. Their ships were massive, heavily armed, and designed to overwhelm with sheer force. They had learned to strike hard and fast, to break their enemies before they could even react. Elise had been in combat before, but this felt different. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with anticipation and fear. But she had a job to do, and fear had no place in her command. Captain! Commander Riker spoke from the tactical station. I've been analyzing the Krenth fleet's formation. They're approaching in a standard wedge pattern, designed to apply maximum pressure on the front lines. If we stay out in the open, we'll be sitting ducks. I know, Elise said. Her mind clicked through possibilities. They could take the fight to them, hit them before they had a chance to unleash their full assault. Prepare to enter the asteroid field. We'll use it for cover, get up close, and take them by surprise. Riker raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. The field is dense. It'll be hard to maneuver, especially at speed. If we don't time it right, we'll be vulnerable. Elise's eyes narrowed. We don't have a choice. If we give them the time to establish their ground assault, we lose New Horizon. We hit them before they even know what's happening. The crew fell silent, each person processing her words. Elise could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her, but it was the only option. The Krenth had never been defeated by human forces alone, and they certainly didn't expect humanity to fight back like this. Helm, take us into the field. Execute evasive maneuvers. I want to be in range of their flagship in 10 minutes. Elise's voice was steady, commanding. Aye, Captain. Lieutenant Garrett responded, his hands steady on the controls. The Endurance shifted in space, its powerful engines propelling it toward the dense asteroid field. A ripple of tension ran through the crew, but they followed her lead, each person moving with precision, driven by the shared purpose of protecting their home. Captain, Riker said again, voice strained. I'm reading a massive power buildup from the Krenth flagship. They're preparing to fire. Elise's eyes flicked to the main display, where the massive Krenth vessel loomed. Its dark, jagged form was intimidating, dwarfing the Endurance even at this distance. But Elise was undeterred. She had to trust the crew, trust the plan. Target their engines. We'll hit them first. If we can cripple their flagship, the rest of the fleet will scatter. Aye, Captain. Riker replied, his fingers flying over the controls. 10 seconds to impact, Garrett called out, his voice sharp as the ship hurtled through the asteroid field. The rocks outside danced in chaotic patterns, their unpredictable movements creating the perfect cover for an ambush. Elise's grip tightened on the armrests as the Endurance weaved between massive asteroids, moving at breakneck speed. Fire! Elise commanded. The words barely left her lips before Riker's fingers triggered the weapons systems. A volley of plasma torpedoes shot out, streaking through space like streaks of light. The torpedoes found their mark, slamming into the Krenth flagship's engines with explosive force. The enemy ship's shields flickered under the assault, but they held. The Endurance had made its move, but the Krenth weren't as vulnerable as Elise had hoped. They retaliated almost immediately, their weapons firing with devastating power. Shields holding, Riker called out, the ship shaking under the force of the impacts. But they're getting through. We need to get closer to disable their fire control systems. Elise gritted her teeth. Get us closer. We can't let them get the first shot in. Garrett's hands moved expertly over the controls, guiding the ship through the asteroid field with incredible precision. The distance between the two ships closed rapidly. The Endurance was a nimble predator, darting between asteroids while the Krenth flagship lumbered behind, unable to match its speed. The first of the Krenth's plasma cannons fired, narrowly missing the Endurance by meters. Elise's eyes locked on the flagship, calculating their next move. Prepare to fire everything we have, she said, her voice cold and determined. Take them down. In that moment, the Krenth fleet's overconfidence seemed to falter. The human crew was faster, more adaptable than they anticipated. And it was that moment of hesitation that Elise needed. She had a plan, one that would change the course of this battle and prove once and for all that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with the might of the Krenth Empire. Fire! Elise shouted. The Endurance released its full arsenal. Plasma torpedoes, missiles, and pulse lasers all converged on the Krenth flagship. This time, they didn't miss. The flagship's shield shattered under the relentless barrage, and the ship erupted in flames, its engines failing as the Endurance carved its way through the battlefield. The Krenth fleet scrambled to regroup, but their advantage had been shattered. For the first time in the battle, Elise allowed herself a small, tight smile. They weren't done yet, but humanity had just delivered its first blow. The Endurance pulled back into the asteroid field, its systems battered but intact. The first strike had been made, and the Krenth had tasted their own vulnerability. But Elise knew the battle was far from over. This was just the beginning. Prepare for the next wave, she said, her voice unwavering. We've got them where we want them, you said. The Endurance hovered in the shadow of the asteroids, its damaged hull groaning as it stabilized in the wake of the brutal exchange with the Krenth flagship. Elise Juno stood at the command console, staring at the flickering display. The Krenth fleet was regrouping, a menacing force with dozens of ships, their weapons primed for retaliation. Despite the human victory in the initial strike, Elise knew the worst was yet to come. Captain, Riker said, his voice strained as he looked at the data streaming across his screen. The Krenth are falling back, but they're not retreating. They've adapted. Their flagship is still operational. They're going to try again, harder. Elise nodded, her eyes never leaving the screen. She could feel the pressure building in her chest, the weight of every decision growing heavier with each passing second. The Endurance was only one ship. One ship against an entire fleet. But it wasn't just her crew fighting now. It was humanity's survival on the line. We need to stay ahead of them, she said, her voice cold and focused. Keep the pressure on. Riker, target their command vessels, disrupt their fleet coordination. Aye, Captain, Riker replied, his fingers flying over the tactical controls. I'm locking on to the lead cruiser. They're trying to regroup, but we can break their formation with a few more well-placed hits. Elise watched as the ship's weapons systems powered up. The Krenth were regrouping, sure, but they were making a critical mistake. They had underestimated the humans' ability to think on their feet, to react and evolve in the heat of battle. Fire when ready, Elise commanded. The Endurance launched another wave of torpedoes and pulse lasers, the weapons cutting through the void like streaks of light. The Krenth flagship, despite being heavily damaged, maneuvered to intercept. Their shields flared brightly as the human fire collided with them. Elise gripped the edge of the command chair as explosions rippled across the battlefield. The Krenth were formidable, but this time, they were slower. They had spent so long relying on their overwhelming firepower and their arrogance that they hadn't expected humans to strike so decisively. They were scrambling now, trying to bring their massive forces into line, but Elise's crew had already adapted. It was no longer just about raw firepower. It was about tactics. And the humans were playing the Krenth at their own game. "We've got one of their destroyers in our sights," Riker reported. "We can't break their formation yet, but we can take out their main command vessel if we hit the weak spot. The damaged engines should make them vulnerable." "Do it," Elise said, her voice unwavering. "Let them know what happens when they underestimate us." The Endurance shifted, its engines roaring to life as it veered toward the Krenth command ship. The tactical readouts indicated a small gap in the ship's shield network, just enough for them to strike. Elise's mind raced as the ship closed in on its target. The crew was working seamlessly now, their movements fluid, instinctive. They had been through simulations, drills, training. But nothing had prepared them for this. "Steady," she murmured, watching the enemy ship grow larger on the screen. "Hold your fire until we're in range." A long breath. And then the command she had been waiting to give. "Fire!" The Endurance unleashed a torrent of energy, a focused blast of torpedoes and laser fire that tore through the weakened shields of the Krenth command ship. The explosion rocked the battlefield, sending shockwaves through the nearby ships. Elise's heart skipped a beat as she watched the command vessel break apart, its remains drifting like burning debris. "That was a direct hit," Riker said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "They've lost their central coordination. The fleet's collapsing." Elise exhaled slowly, but there was no time for celebration. The Krenth fleet was beginning to scatter, but their retaliation was coming, fast and fierce. "Get us out of here," she ordered. "We need to make sure they don't regroup. I want all remaining ships targeted. We hit them while they're disorganized." Garrett's voice crackled over the intercom. "We've got multiple vessels closing in. They're trying to encircle us." Elise's brow furrowed. "They're not backing off. We need to make them think we're weak, make them believe they can overwhelm us. Set course to the far side of the system. We'll bait them into chasing us." "Aye, Captain," Garrett replied. The Endurance shot forward, weaving through the debris field as it veered toward the outer edge of the system. The Krenth ships followed, their massive weapons locked onto the smaller human ship. Elise watched the tactical display, her mind working out the angles. They were chasing her right into a trap. "Riker, I want you to target the Krenth ships that are closest to us," Elise said, her voice low but fierce. "We'll use the asteroid belt as cover. The moment they're within range, we spring the trap." Riker's fingers flew over the console. "Target locked. We've got a dozen of their ships in range. I'm ready when you are." "No," Elise ordered. The Endurance veered sharply, its engines roaring as it dove into the heart of the asteroid field. The Krenth fleet followed, unaware of the trap that lay ahead. The rocks and debris were massive, some as large as small moons, and they would be the perfect weapon. As the Krenth ships entered the asteroid belt, Elise gave the order. "Fire!" The Endurance released a barrage of missiles, the explosions rocking the Krenth vessels. The first wave hit the ships with devastating precision, their shields unable to withstand the surprise assault. The Krenth fleet was caught in a maelstrom of debris and energy, their ships faltering as they struggled to regroup. The Endurance was a dancer among the debris, its movements fluid and graceful as it darted through the chaos. Elise gripped the edge of her command chair as the ship weaved through the asteroid field, firing on the Krenth ships as they fell into disarray. "We've got them," Riker said, his voice filled with awe. "They never saw it coming." But Elise wasn't done yet. "Don't let up. We've got one shot to take them down. We need to finish this." The Endurance pressed on, taking advantage of the chaos. The Krenth were regrouping, but they were no longer the cohesive force they had been moments before. They had underestimated humanity's cunning, and now they were paying the price. As the last of the Krenth ships fell, Elise allowed herself a brief moment of relief. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The Krenth would return, of that she was certain. "Send the message to Earth," Elise said, her voice calm but resolute. "Tell them we're not done yet." "You said?" The void outside the Endurance was silent, as it always was, a vast expanse of nothingness that contrasted with the thunderous battle just moments ago. Inside the ship, however, there was no quiet. The crew was on edge, their exhaustion apparent despite the adrenaline rush of their victory. The Krenth fleet had been crippled, but they had not been completely destroyed. And Elise knew, this was the calm before the storm. "Captain," Riker said, his voice low as he approached her, "they're not retreating. The Krenth are regathering their forces. They're trying to regroup in the outer systems." Elise didn't take her eyes off the holographic display. The Krenth had always been resilient, and she had expected this. They would not give up so easily. "We've bought ourselves some time, but not much. They'll come back, and when they do, we need to be ready." "We're not out of this yet, Captain," Riker replied. "The Endurance is running on reserves, and the Krenth won't make the same mistake again." "I know," Elise muttered, her hand clenched into a fist. "But we're not finished here. We can't let them regroup. If we give them the chance, New Horizon will be lost." The ship had sustained heavy damage in the fight, nothing they couldn't handle, but it would take time to fully repair. They were on the edge, with no more reinforcements in sight. This battle was for everything. Elise turned to her crew. "We're not fighting a war of attrition here. This isn't about holding out. It's about winning. The Krenth don't believe we can take them down, but I've got one last card to play." She could see the doubt in their eyes. They were all worn thin, but that was why they were here. The Endurance was humanity's last hope, and she wouldn't let that fall to the Krenth. "Prepare the prototype," Elise ordered. Commander Riker's eyes widened. "Captain, that weapon is untested. It's a gamble at best. If it doesn't work—" "I know the risks," she interrupted. "But it's the only way. If we don't take this chance, we lose everything." Hours later, the Endurance was back on the move, having repaired enough to maneuver through the asteroid fields again. The Krenth had split into smaller groups, but Elise knew it was only a matter of time before they joined forces once more. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Krenth fleet," Garrett, the communications officer, reported. "They're demanding surrender." Elise's lips curled into a bitter smile. "They think we're beaten. Let them think that. We don't surrender." Riker stepped forward, a flicker of concern in his eyes. "Captain, are you sure about the prototype? The weapon is a one-shot deal. If we miss, we're as good as dead." Elise met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words. The prototype was humanity's last, desperate attempt to turn the tide, a weapon so powerful it could disable an entire fleet with one shot. But the Krenth were clever, and they would be expecting some sort of trick. She wasn't sure it would work, but without it, they would never have a chance. "We don't get to decide if we survive after this. We fight or we die. I trust the weapon. I trust you," she said, her voice unwavering. The Endurance raced toward the Krenth fleet, their massive ships looming ahead like predatory beasts. This time, there was no asteroid field to hide behind. This was a direct confrontation. And the Krenth were ready. Their weapons locked onto the Endurance, their shields flaring as they prepared to strike. "All hands brace for impact," Riker called, his voice tinged with urgency. Elise's hands were steady as she looked at the weapons system's readout. The prototype was primed. It was their only chance. If they missed, the Endurance wouldn't survive long enough to try again. The Krenth fleet would overwhelm them. "Fire!" she said, her voice low but commanding. The ship's main cannon fired, the blast a flash of blue light that illuminated the void like a supernova. For a heartbeat, The universe seemed to hold its breath. "Direct hit!" Riker exclaimed. "It's working! Their shields are down!" But before they could celebrate, the Krenth returned fire. The Endurance shook violently as plasma bolts slammed into the hull. Elise gritted her teeth as the ship rocked, her knuckles white against the armrest. They couldn't hold out much longer. The Krenth would strike again, and their next move would be decisive. "Second wave incoming!" Riker shouted. "We've got to get out of here. The Endurance can't take another hit like that." Elise's mind raced. They had just broken the Krenth's outer defenses, but their flagship was still operational. The Krenth had regrouped faster than she had expected. This wasn't over yet. "We're not running, Riker," Elise said firmly. "We take the fight to them." She gripped the armrest, her eyes scanning the battlefield as she made a decision. "Garrett, plot a course through the debris field. We'll use their fire against them. And Riker, target the Krenth flagship. Disable their engines." "Captain, we've got only one shot at this," Riker said, his tone sharp. "If we get too close." "We're getting too close," Elise interrupted. "No more games. We hit them now, or we lose everything." The Endurance surged forward, weaving through debris with agility only possible from a ship like this. The Krenth fleet, disoriented and scrambling, wasn't prepared for the sudden, calculated maneuver. Elise's fingers flew over the command panel, steering the ship through the rocks and scattered shipwrecks from past battles. Each move had to be perfect. One wrong turn and they'd be sitting targets. "Engaging!" Riker called as the ship locked onto the Krenth flagship. The weapon systems hummed as they adjusted, the power levels reaching their peak. The Endurance dove deeper into the debris, using the shattered remnants of asteroids as cover. The Krenth flagship loomed ahead, its massive form closing in fast. Elise's heart pounded, but her mind was clear. There was no room for hesitation. "Fire now!" Elise commanded. The ship's primary weapon discharged again, its immense power slamming into the Krenth flagship's core. The explosion was deafening, a brilliant burst of light that tore through space. The flagship staggered, its engines erupting in a chain of explosions that lit up the battlefield. The Krenth fleet began to retreat, their coordination shattered. The Endurance had done it. Against all odds, they had struck the heart of the Krenth invasion. But Elise knew this victory was fleeting. The war was far from over. The Krenth would regroup, adapt, and return. But for now, humanity had won. Elise allowed herself a single breath of relief. The gamble had paid off. For now, Earth and its colonies were safe. But the fight was just beginning. "Send word to Earth," Elise said, her voice steady. "Tell them we've won this battle. But the war is far from over," you said.